The story that Prince Harry has spent years trying to sell to the world is suddenly cracking, and the courtroom may finally be the place where the cracks turn into fractures. For years, Harry positioned himself as the prince under siege, a man hunted by ruthless tabloids, betrayed by a vicious media machine that he claimed illegally invaded his private life. He told the world that newspapers like the Daily Mail built entire stories using phone hacking, secret surveillance, and unethical tactics designed to destroy him. It was the foundation of his crusade against the British press. The narrative was simple: Harry the victim, the tabloids the villains. But now, as his legal battle with the Daily Mail enters a dramatic new phase, something unexpected is happening inside the courtroom, and the testimony emerging is quietly dismantling the narrative piece by piece. Journalists are stepping forward under oath, and their explanations for how stories about Harry actually appeared in newspapers are far less sinister than the prince has claimed. In fact, according to testimony presented in court, the truth might be something Harry never expected to hear spoken out loud in front of a judge. The stories did not come from hacking. They came from people around him. Rebecca English, one of the reporters Harry specifically accused of unethical journalism, delivered testimony that sounded less like a scandal and more like a lesson in basic reporting. She described how tips arrived at news desks the way they always have in celebrity journalism. People called, sources talked, insiders whispered, and reporters followed up using traditional methods. No hacking, no illegal spying, just the same machinery of gossip that has surrounded celebrities for decades. In other words, Harry's biggest enemy might not have been the press. It might have been his own circle, friends talking at parties, associates sharing information, people close to him picking up the phone and giving journalists exactly the details that later exploded across newspaper pages. The defense team has already labeled Harry's allegations utterly crazy, arguing that the evidence shows a much simpler explanation for the stories that upset him so deeply. The tabloids didn't steal his secrets. Someone near him gave them away. And the courtroom atmosphere surrounding this revelation is becoming increasingly uncomfortable for the prince, because this case is not unfolding in front of a sympathetic audience or a television interviewer eager to nod along with his grievances. It is unfolding before a judge whose reputation, according to insiders familiar with the proceedings, leaves little room for emotional theatrics. Lady Colin Campbell, who reportedly knows the judge presiding over the case, offered a blunt prediction about how the courtroom dynamic might play out. This judge, she explained, has no patience for dramatic displays of victimhood. Tears, emotional speeches, or attempts to paint oneself as persecuted will not influence a legal decision built on evidence. And evidence is exactly where the problems began, because Harry's public record has created a contradiction that the court cannot ignore. For years, he has accused the press of invading his privacy, yet he has simultaneously built an entire new career on revealing his private life to the world. The same man who claims journalists crossed unforgivable lines willingly signed massive deals with media giants like Netflix, Spotify, and Penguin Random House. He turned his personal experiences into global entertainment, releasing documentaries, interviews, and a memoir that exposed deeply intimate details about his family, his relationships, and even his own body. That contradiction now sits at the heart of the courtroom debate. How does a man argue that private details should never be published while personally publishing them for profit? Harry's memoir Spare became the ultimate example of that contradiction. The book contained astonishingly personal revelations about his life, stories about drug use, private arguments with his brother, and even bizarre anecdotes about his own physical injuries. Those passages were not leaked by journalists. Harry chose to publish them himself, and legal observers believe that decision may haunt him in court, because the moment a public figure begins monetizing their own personal life, the boundary between privacy and publicity becomes dangerously blurred. The prince, who once demanded protection from media intrusion, has now become a media personality himself, a man whose brand depends entirely on public attention. You cannot sue the media while becoming part of the media. That reality is now hovering over the courtroom like a silent question. But Harry's legal fight is only one piece of a much bigger story unfolding around him, a story involving collapsing Hollywood deals, shifting alliances, and a streaming giant that may be preparing to turn his life into the very kind of entertainment he claims to despise. Because while Harry battles the Daily Mail in court, another powerful force is quietly repositioning itself in the background: Netflix. The company that once welcomed Harry and Meghan Markle as prized partners in their global entertainment empire is now sending signals that the relationship may be changing. The same streaming platform that paid millions for the couple's content has begun pulling away from projects tied to them, including Meghan's lifestyle brand and several stalled productions. And insiders say something even more unsettling may be coming next: a dramatized story about the Sussexes Sussexes themselves. Netflix is already producing a series exploring the fallout surrounding Prince Andrew's scandal, developed by the same production team that created The Crown. If that project proves successful with audiences, sources suggest the streaming giant could eventually move toward dramatizing the Sussex saga as well, not with Harry and Meghan. About them, that distinction changes everything. When Harry and Meghan released their own documentary and interviews, they controlled the narrative. They decided which moments the public saw. They shaped their story carefully, presenting themselves as victims of a cruel institution and a hostile press. But a Netflix dramatization would place their lives entirely in someone else's hands. Writers would decide which moments mattered. Directors would choose which arguments to highlight. Actors would portray them, perhaps sympathetically, perhaps not. And suddenly, Harry would experience exactly what he claims to have fled, strangers interpreting his private life for global entertainment. The irony is almost impossible to ignore. The prince who left the royal family to escape media intrusion might find himself starring in the most dramatic retelling of his own story, without any control over how it is told. Meanwhile, the Hollywood empire Harry and Meghan hope to build outside the palace walls appears to be struggling in ways that insiders describe as baffling. Take the romantic film project Meet Me at the Lake. Netflix reportedly spent around $3 million acquiring the rights to the best-selling novel, expecting Archewell Productions to turn it into a major film. The book had buzz, the platform had money, and the Sussex name was supposed to bring attention. 3 years later, the project still has no director, no cast, no production timeline. According to Hollywood insiders, projects that succeed in development move quickly because talent wants to be involved. Directors attach themselves. Actors compete for roles. Momentum builds. But projects without momentum simply stall. And this one appears frozen. The pattern extends to other projects connected to the Sussex production company. A documentary about Girl Scout cookies titled Cookie Queens debuted at the Sundance Film Festival but failed to secure a distributor. Another romantic adaptation called The Wedding Date sits in the same strange limbo, announced publicly, then quietly disappearing from development news. In Hollywood, silence usually means trouble. Studios do not pay producers indefinitely without results. First-look deals exist so companies can evaluate projects early, but those deals depend on one essential ingredient: actual content. And according to one industry source, Netflix may soon face a decision about whether the Sussex partnership still makes business sense, because curiosity about their royal exit once drove massive interest. Their first documentary succeeded largely because audiences wanted to hear their version of events. But that well has already been tapped. The accusations have been made. The interviews have been aired. The book has been published. What Netflix expected next was creative production, films, series, documentaries. Instead, the pipeline appears strangely empty. Behind the scenes, another explosive claim is circulating through Hollywood circles, one that insiders say may explain why so many Sussex projects struggle to move forward. According to reports cited by entertainment commentators, Meghan Markle has expressed a desire not just to produce projects, but to direct them herself. And that ambition, insiders say, has triggered resistance inside Netflix. Directing major productions is not a casual promotion in Hollywood. Directors typically spend years climbing the industry ladder, working through assistant positions, television episodes, and smaller projects before being trusted with large-scale productions. When someone attempts to leap directly into that role, especially without extensive experience, friction becomes inevitable. Multiple sources claim that Netflix executives prefer Meghan to remain attached to projects in name only rather than being deeply involved in production decisions. If those tensions are real, they may explain why projects linked to Archewell seem to stall before cameras ever start rolling. But Hollywood politics are only one battlefield Harry is currently fighting. Back in London, inside a courtroom, the prince is facing a very different kind of confrontation, one where narratives are replaced by evidence and emotional appeals must survive legal scrutiny. Because the question at the center of his case is brutally simple. Did the press illegally invade his privacy? Or did the people closest to him simply talk? That question may ultimately decide whether Harry's long war with the tabloids ends in triumph, or in an outcome far more humiliating than he ever expected. And the deeper the courtroom testimony goes, the more it begins to look like the story Harry believed he was exposing may actually be exposing him instead. The deeper this saga unfolds, the clearer it becomes that Prince Harry may not just be fighting a legal battle, he may be fighting a battle for control over the story of his own life. Because while the courtroom drama with the Daily Mail intensifies, a much larger storm is gathering far beyond the walls of the High Court, and it involves the very companies Harry once believed would guarantee his independence from the royal institution he left behind. When Harry Harry and Meghan Markle sat down with Oprah in 2021, they projected supreme confidence. The message was unmistakable. They had escaped the palace system and replaced it with something far more powerful: Hollywood, streaming deals, publishing contracts, a global platform that would allow them to tell their truth without interference. Netflix was supposed to be the crown jewel of that new empire. The streaming giant wasn't just another business partner. In Harry's own words at the time, Netflix had become a collaborator in their vision for the future, proof that they didn't need royal titles or palace support to succeed. It symbolized independence, validation, and financial security. But now, several years later, the partnership that once looked like a golden ticket is beginning to look far more complicated. Behind the scenes, Netflix appears to be quietly recalculating the value of its relationship with the Sussexes. Executives who once enthusiastically supported their projects are now facing a simple reality. The deals were based on curiosity about Harry and Meghan's dramatic exit from the royal family. That curiosity had an expiration date. Their documentary series initially attracted enormous viewership because audiences wanted to see the inside story of the royal split. Accusations of betrayal, claims of racism, emotional interviews, and a family feud playing out on a global stage created irresistible drama. But once those revelations were released, what came next? The answer, according to multiple industry observers, is very little. Projects stalled, announcements faded into silence, and the promise that Harry and Meghan would transform into major Hollywood producers began to look increasingly uncertain. The romantic adaptation, Meet Me at the Lake, was supposed to prove that Archewell Productions could deliver creative content beyond royal gossip. Netflix invested millions in the project and positioned it as a major production tied to the Sussex brand. 3 years later, it still hasn't moved forward. No director, no cast, no filming schedule. Because if the legal battles continue, the Hollywood deals weaken, and the monarchy finally decides to draw a line, the prince who once believed he was rewriting the rules of royal life may discover something far more unsettling. The story he thought he controlled might ultimately be written by everyone else.